What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the 10-7 MMA Show. And today we are back with a lot of actually pretty interesting stuff that happened over the weekend. A lot of cool stuff that we're going to talk about. I don't even think we've got, let me see here. I don't believe we're going to talk about the Rose Namajunas fight, which was actually amazing. But there's just so many other things that have happened that I figured we'd focus on. But that was an incredible fight against Tracy Cortez, and Rose came out with the win. She's back at it, kind of on her way to the title, which is really exciting, really amazing. Hold on one second. Oh, Louisa, can you get it's Ricardo? Thank you. Sorry guys. And so yeah, basically we've had a lot of interesting things that have happened in the news and different things that I wanted to cover. But I hope you guys had an amazing weekend. Now, what we're going to start with first is a video and a story that has basically gone viral everywhere. And that is that the UFC Sphere card has apparently been leaked. And we're going to talk about this in detail right now. So just to give you guys a summation of what went down, basically there was it wasn't a French feed from France, right? It was a French Quebec feed. And I know this because Ariel Helwani clarified today on his show. So there was a broadcast where the announcers in French for the French Quebec feed talked about the UFC Sphere card. And he's like, okay, well, we're going to make an announcement. The headliner for the card is going to be Ilia Topuria versus Max Holloway. And also who's going to be on the card is Sean O'Malley versus Merab. Now, people took that as a leak, right? So, hey, we now know the main event and the co-main event for UFC 306 in the Sphere, and everybody's been going crazy, right? Now, by the way, let's see this. Gene Silva, yeah. Or I think it's Jayon Silva. I can't remember the pronunciation. Anakin Skywalker, you're right on it. Holy smokes. What an amazing fight that was against Drew Dober. Unreal. The fireworks there. Fireworks were out of control if you guys haven't seen it. Okay, anyways, we're going to come back to this. And by the way, Anakin said, I heard this Sphere card only has 10 fights. See if it will feature Mally versus Merab and Valentina versus Grasso. So I wouldn't be, so Valentina versus DeGrasso sounds like a more reasonable possibility, but let's talk about what was leaked. Okay. So what was leaked was Sean O'Malley, as I said, versus Merab, which was mentioned. I do think that is going to be on there, and I'm going to tell you guys why in a second. But then the second fight was Max Holloway versus Ilia Topuria. So just think about that for a second. I'm going to tell you what Ariel said in a moment, but people just took that and were like, hey, it must have been leaked. From a logical standpoint, and especially if you're buying into what Ariel's been saying, and I think we have to all admit at this point that Ariel, we knew this before, that he's a trusted source. Some people were saying he was being fed disinformation or misinformation from the McGregor camp about UFC 303. He was proved right in the end. So I mean, come on, we got to give him his props and give him his due. He's in the know. He knows what's up. So he basically said that back in the day, they're not going to put not back in the day, but recently, that Conor McGregor is not going to headline the Sphere, as a lot of people have said, because it's too expensive. They've already invested 17 million. Yes, they have Saudi Arabia, the Saudis basically sponsoring the event, which will help to defray the cost. But at the end of the day, if Conor is too expensive, what would make anybody think that they're going to stack the card? Think about it. Max Holloway, who's arguably the second or the third hottest athlete in the sport right now. Ilia Topuria, champion. He's going to get pay-per-view points. And you've got Sean O'Malley, champion. He's going to be on there. And I mean, we're talking about this type of a card, maybe even still Valentina Shevchenko against Alexa DeGrasso, right? It's supposed to be Mexican Independence Day. So that might go on there. I mean, it just doesn't make sense. It's too, if you're trying to make it this to be the biggest event of all time, I mean, perhaps there's a chance that they might throw all this together, but it feels like overkill to me. Why would you put Max Holloway and Ilia Topuria? Ilia is one of the hottest new champions around on the same card with Sean. It never made sense to me. Actually, there was a point where I was like, maybe, right? It leaked. Who knows? Is this a real thing? But if you just look at it logically, it doesn't make sense. Now, Ariel went on a show today addressing just this and basically saying that, look, he's been talking to people for weeks. He knows what is kind of being speculated and talked about for UFC 306 at the Sphere. And one thing that has been talked about a lot is Sean O'Malley versus Merab. Why? Because Merab has said over and over he considers himself to be adopted by the Mexican community in the country of Mexico. Sean O'Malley considers himself to be Mexican because his wife is Mexican and his kids are Mexican. Therefore, he's part of that bloodline. He is Mexican as well. I think Alexa Grasso makes total sense. Who knows who else they'll have on there? Other amazing Mexican fighters. They got a lot to choose from, but I think that is where we stand, that this is just simply a misread. Somebody made a mistake. It was some random person. I don't think he got to see a promo. I don't think he has any inside information. He just made a whole ado about nothing. Let's look at these comments from Anakin real quick. Topuria versus Max and Pennington versus Pena could be on Salt Lake, but will the elevation hurt Topuria if this is true? Oh, that's interesting. So I haven't heard that yet, but that would be great. That whole elevation situation is quite tricky, but I imagine if you come in and do the preparation early enough and you get there and you acclimate, hopefully that should be negated. Okay, and we've also got Anakin talking about Dober being a real one for pushing through despite the cut. Yeah, dude, that fight was a banger if you guys haven't seen it yet. So anyways, just wanted to address this. One second. This story because it's blown up, and as I mentioned, it's viral, going everywhere. I don't think it's true. Wouldn't call it cap. It was just a mistake. Okay. All right, guys, there we go. Topic number 1. And by the way, if I haven't mentioned this, Justin is gone right now and he's not here today, sadly. Celine and the rest of you guys who I know love hearing Justin's take on things. He was in Alaska. He's traveling back right now, so he couldn't make the show today. So I am taking it on my own. All right, let's move on to topic number 2. Conor McGregor seems to have a date locked in for his UFC return. So where did this story come about? I want to talk about this. I want to tell you guys what I think is the date. And this is coming from multiple people that have said this. So Conor McGregor tweeted, it was his birthday, for those of you guys who don't know, yesterday. For those of you non-diehard Conor McGregor fans, so it was his birthday. I think he turned 36. And he was posting some different things. And one of the things he posted was, he's like, all right, I talked to the UFC. I have a date now for our fight with me and Chandler, a date locked in. Okay. And people are speculating. But this is fantastic news, by the way. He's saying that they will fight in 2024. So what does that tell me if he's saying they're going to fight in 2024? He's given the least amount of information available to tell us the soonest that it's going to be. That's my assumption, meaning this December date that's been speculated by Ariel and others probably seems to be the one. I know other folks are saying, hey, they're trying to make the Sphere the biggest event possible. They're going to put Conor there. They're going to sneak him in. I just don't think that's legitimate. I don't think that's what's happening. Again, because I trust Ariel, A, and B, it would seem to be extremely expensive. And Ariel has said this, and it's true. It has to be true. You're not going to put another championship fight on the Conor McGregor card because pay-per-view sales are going to be part of the contractual obligation for champions. It's going to muddy the waters. It's going to make it just too expensive. So I agree. And think about it. Conor was supposed to fight at 303 and there weren't any champions on there. I mean, just read the writing on the wall. So it's not going to be at the Sphere, despite I know a lot of people speculating that it would be. I think that was incorrect from the jump. Sorry to those of you guys who were speculating and kind of developing this conspiratorial idea, which was interesting, but I think it was wrong. So Conor McGregor has now confirmed he will be back in 2024. I'm going to go with Ariel on this. I'm going to assume, yes, indeed, we're in December. That's the date that makes sense. Yeah, Western Mass Climber says no, Justin. Yeah, it's a bummer. But he'll be back Friday and hopefully doing some videos during the week. And we've got Anakin. I feel bad for Chandler. Just keeps waiting and waiting. This is a repeat from 2023. Yeah, like, I want to get your guys' opinions. Put your thoughts in the chat about what you think about Michael Chandler continuing to wait at this point, because he's doing some weird things. I can't remember if this is one of the topics today that we're talking about. Yeah. Okay. So let's go into topic number 3, because this addresses this point exactly about you saying you're feeling bad for Michael Chandler. Here's where I'm at it in terms of everything. You hear other fighters, namely Dustin Poirier, a few others, when they're asked at this point, would you continue to wait for this fight? And I think I talked about this last week to some extent. It could make sense in a way where you're saying, hey, you're going to make 10. Conor said you're going to make 10 times what you'd make against any other fighter when you fight me. And that could be true, but it's not necessarily true. Okay, we go back to when Conor fought Cowboy Cerrone. Cowboy Cerrone came out and said, no, I didn't get a bump. I didn't get the red panty night, because that was his first fight against Conor. He was locked in a contract and he got what he was contractually owed. That's it. Done deal, right? Where there's wiggle room and where people make a tremendous amount of money is when Conor himself is now vying for a rematch. Case in point, Nate Diaz versus Conor Part 2, right? Then Nate Diaz had leverage. Then Nate Diaz was able to negotiate beyond what he was contractually obligated to receive for that fight. Same thing with Dustin Poirier. He said on the show, the third fight was different than the second fight monetarily. Why? Because he had beaten Conor. Now Conor wanted the rematch. Now he had negotiating room. Now he had the leverage to demand pay-per-view points and made a killing on that fight. I think the speculation was around 10 million. Don't quote me on that. Michael Chandler, this is his first fight. He doesn't have that wiggle room. Okay. So is he getting pay-per-view points? I know people said he's probably getting pay-per-view points. I don't see why he would. It doesn't make any sense. Why? Think about it from the standpoint of the UFC. Why would you offer pay-per-view points, especially to somebody who seems so hungry for this fight, calling it out, wanting it? It just doesn't make sense. Why would you need that incentive structure? He's desperately wanting it, probably because he believes it'll bolster his name in the game, his reputation, set him up for a big fight afterwards. If he wins, maybe a Conor rematch. There's all these different possibilities that are potentially profitable down the line. Why would they give him pay-per-view points? So he's not getting pay-per-view points. I think that he's banking on this fight going his way and then leveraging it into something else, another opportunity. Now, so do I feel bad for Chandler at this point? Man, it's kind of hard to feel bad for him because all these decisions have been made on his own. He took on the risk. He's even said he doesn't want people to feel bad for him. And then here's where I think people are starting to, as I'll call it, maybe turn on Chandler a little bit. And I'll tell you why I think this is happening, at least from my perspective. I look at a lot of the UFC fighters. I think all fans, we look up to them. We look up to them almost like superheroes. We looked up to them with great moral strength, strength of character, obviously physical strength. And a lot of the things that they do in spite of a tremendous amount of fear. Okay. Now, when we look at somebody like Dustin Poirier, or, I know Khamzat's been getting some crap lately, but we look at these warriors and they're just willing to fight anybody at any time, any place. Let's go. We don't care. Right. And this notion that we kind of look up to them, I think is what allows us to like them and be fans of them. And for them to take last minute fights and to do things, to throw it on the line. Now, I'm not saying he has to do that or should do that. By no means. He's in charge of his life and he's got to make decisions for his family. I get that. But what I'm telling you is this is why I think fans are losing interest in Chandler and starting to almost clown him in some degree, because it's like, why are you so desperately clinging on to this fight if you're not getting pay-per-view points and you're just using it to raise your profile when you could take on other fights? And are you cut from the same cloth as guys that we love and idolize so much, like Dustin Poirier, we can even say Conor McGregor to a large degree. Before everything blew up, he was willing to fight anybody at any time, just taking fights to stay active. And whether it's right or wrong, these are the fighters that we look up to. These are the fighters that we admire. And clearly at this point, Chandler just seems to be sticking it out and sort of going with the flow, being at the beck and call of another fighter. And I think it is antithetical to the way that we want to view fighters. And hence we're coming up with a lot of hate for Michael Chandler. And I'm, again, not defending him and I'm not attacking him. I'm just telling you from the fan perspective where my subconscious is going, where it's like, I just don't put him in the same category anymore as Justin Gaethje, as Dustin Poirier. Like, Justin Gaethje could have fought Conor and he was like, nah, I'm not going to do that. I'm not saying it was the right or wrong decision. He wanted to go fight for the belt because he had different ambitions. He wasn't beholden to one certain fighter, one paycheck, one clout boost. You know what I mean? And for whatever reason, that's admirable because he's like taking that back into his own control. He wants to carve his own path, regardless of this fighter, this payday, that payday. Okay. So let me know in the comments if you agree or disagree with me. Let me shine the light on Anakin real quick. If Chandler didn't fight Conor, he could have had a title fight versus Islam or any other big fights that could have been a better option. Yeah, I mean, here's the thing is, like, first of all, let's talk about the Islam fight, okay? Let's talk about that first. Chandler went out on Twitter or something, and, like, this is where man, I hate to pile on Chandler, but it is starting to be, it's a little ridiculous. He posted that he was offered Islam or could have fought Islam, and he chose not to. He's still waiting for the fight for Conor. But again, let's talk about this the same way we talked about the UFC Sphere card leak, right? The quote-unquote leak. Does it make sense that Michael Chandler would be offered a title fight at this point? I just want to show you guys something, okay? Let's look at Michael Chandler's oops, what the heck just happened? We're going to look at Michael Chandler's record right now. All right, so we've got 23-8. I'm going to share the screen right now. Let's take a look here. Okay, 1 second. Here we go. Stats. Boom. Okay. So here's his history in the UFC. Win against Dan Hooker. Loss. Win against Tony Ferguson. Loss to Dustin Poirier. So Dustin Poirier just had a title shot and he lost. Michael Chandler's last fight was just around 2 years ago, maybe a year and change, fine. But like, what is that? A year and November is the July 7th. So yeah, a year and 9 months ago. Okay. That was his last fight. And it was a loss to the person that just lost the title shot right now. Why in the world? It makes zero sense from where does it make sense anywhere? I mean, Michael, look, and I want to see Michael Chandler fight Conor McGregor. I'm not saying it's totally uninteresting to me, but I just don't see how Michael Chandler would be the opponent that would be thought of to now get slotted into a title shot, given the fact that he's probably going to lose to Islam, especially considering the way he's fought and continues to fight and just the gap in skill set and whatnot. It doesn't seem deserving. I mean, why would this? I just don't get it. So I think there's cap there. I don't think that was a sincere offer. I think he was lying in a lot. Look, it's not just me saying this. This has been fighter after fighter. Dan Hooker just went on the Submission Radio podcast over the weekend. He's just like, yeah, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. Basically saying that probably Chandler's being dishonest or lying. Like maybe Chandler's just getting desperate at this point to put stuff out there to stay somewhat relevant, maybe to divert the fans who are attacking him for basically like, why are you waiting for this fight? Why are you just a Conor McGregor sycophant or whatever it might be? You know, I'm sure he's dealing with a lot right now. I'm sure he's worried. I'm sure he's concerned. I'm sure he's trying different things. I just don't think it's real. And it just is silly to me. If it is real and I'm wrong, wow, I'm shocked because it makes zero sense. I think a lot of people would be pissed off that he would be elevated to a title shot after just simply waiting for a fight and not having a fight for 2 years. There's got to be a point at which you, like, we know that this is also part entertainment, part sport, but there's got to be a point where you have to draw a line in the sand and be like, this is ridiculous. This is just too disrespectful to other fighters out there. Okay. Let's look at this other comment. I can't believe the Sphere card will only be 10 fights. We have 4 more fights to be announced for that card. Yeah, it's going to be amazing. Anakin says Ignacio versus, okay, interesting. Man, Anakin, you know your stuff. This is amazing. Welcome to the community. We really appreciate it. I absolutely feel bad for Chandler, Western Mass Climber. He should have had the Conor fight so long ago. I can't even remember. Yeah, I mean, I see that perspective, and it does suck, and I'm sure he was banking on it, and they did the Ultimate Fighter, and he thought this and that. Yeah, but it's kind of a dynamic thing. It's like maybe you would feel bad for him a year ago or 9 months ago or something like that, right? But I think as it's a changing equation. It's kind of like if you're sitting at home waiting for something to be delivered that you're expecting that day. It's like, yeah, you're going to feel bad for somebody that it doesn't arrive that day. But then you're waiting there for another week for it to show up and just sitting at the door not doing anything. Okay, now sometime the responsibility has to shift back to you to do something else. If you're still sitting there for a year just waiting for this delivery and haven't worked and done anything, right? There's a point where it's like, all right, now you're just being ridiculous. Have we crossed that point with Chandler yet? I'm not saying we have per se, but I just think that the feeling bad aspect and all that stuff, like there has to be some responsibility that he has to take on to himself. And again, I don't know all the ins and outs of his deal and whatnot. And I could be wrong about him not having pay-per-view points. I don't think I'm wrong, but I could be wrong. So there's a lot of things that I am not on the inside of. We got another comment from Kartik. The Torres Mondes fight is on the Sphere card. O'Malley versus Merab. Yeah, we'll headline. I 100% agree. Okay. And here we go. Last one I'm going to read. I do think Islam versus Arman too. Yeah, I think so. Chandler is in a weird spot, and he's getting up there in age. I think he's 38 now, 37 to 38. Yeah, so that clock is still ticking. Okay, moving on to number 4, Mike Perry versus Jake Paul this Saturday. This is a really exciting fight. I think it's happening in Tampa in Florida, which is a really cool location as well. And I actually kind of want to go. So for those of you guys who don't know, I went to Jake Paul's fight against Nate Diaz last year with Jesse on Fire and a bunch of my friends or one of my friends and a bunch of his friends. And that was a really, really fun fight. And again, I'm not a boxing fan. I am a fan of mixed martial arts, but it ended up being a terrific event. The crowd was going nuts for Jake Paul. If this was in my backyard, would I be going? Maybe. The problem with these cards, though, if you're an MMA fan, is you're kind of really just waiting for the main event. And so that's the one downside versus going to a UFC fight. Like the entire main event, a lot of times will be fire and can be interested for all those fights. That's the next fight I'm probably going to go to is a full-on UFC fight. But anyways, this is a very interesting matchup. But the reason why I want to talk about it today, and we're going to check back in with Justin at the end of the week as well to get his thoughts, but we both kind of shared our thoughts. And at this point, where are we landing with the matchup and the outcome? I've said from the get-go, I think Jake Paul's got the advantage. I think it's pretty clear that Jake Paul's going to win because it's his sport. Whether you want to say Mike Perry is boxing in bare knuckle boxing, it's different. Justin has talked about this numerous times, where when you have no gloves, it changes the game for grappling, for inside punches, for a lot of these rabbit punches that are going to be not allowed in a traditional boxing match because the ref will break you up. And those punches are technically illegal, even though they're landed all the time. Or I think they're illegal or whatever. They'll be broken up. Not a boxing expert. So we have these major differences between bare knuckle and traditional boxing. So I think that and Jake Paul's good. We're going to do a video at some point, by the way. I want to talk about this entire journey that Jake Paul's been on. It's so crazy. If you really sit back and think about what he's done, it's amazing. And then seeing him get on Ariel Helwani's show and talking smack, like confidently, aggressively to people like Mike Perry. I mean, this is completely insane. We're going to do a whole video on the rise and trajectory of Jake Paul, because I think we forget where he came from and the type of person he was back in the day. And now to be talking smack and challenging and beating UFC fighters, real fighters, it's insane. But anyways, Jake Paul's been training hard. He's been doing his work. He's been putting in the time, and he's gotten good at boxing. So I think, once again, we're going to go heavily favor Jake Paul. But there's another interview that happened last week on the MMA Hour with the famous promoter Eddie Hearn. And Eddie Hearn was asked about this fight. He's not too much keeping up on it, but he was asking about something that I hadn't really considered, which is the weight class. Okay. So let me just look all this stuff up. Jake Paul's verse, because I want to get the numbers right. But he made a really interesting point. Okay, 1 second. So let's check this out. So they're fighting at, if you're unfamiliar with the weight classes in boxing, it's something called cruiserweight. Okay. So they're fighting at cruiserweight. And here, let's see. I'll tell you the weight limit. What is cruiserweight limit in boxing? Okay. So it's 200 pounds. Okay. Now, this is very interesting because a couple of reasons. One, cruiserweight at 200 pounds, we're talking about Mike Perry, who normally used to fight at welterweight. Okay, that's a 170-pound limit. I think he's fought at middleweight before, which is 185, but he is by far the smaller guy. Meanwhile, Jake Paul was bulking up to fight Mike Tyson at heavyweight. So now we're definitely in the territory of Jake Paul in terms of the weight. Plus, Mike Perry himself said in an interview earlier this week that there is no rehydration clause, which a lot of times they'll have in boxing matches. And I think that would be fair in this situation. Mike Perry himself said, nah, he didn't want it. He wants Jake to be fully hydrated and all this stuff. It's kind of not fair, though, because what this means is Jake Paul can be substantially heavier on the day of the fight. He can cut weight, which will hurt him, right? He's going to dehydrate his body. It's going to make his brain more fragile potentially. But at the end of the day, he's going to come in with a really hefty weight advantage. And then you compound that with his punching power and his knockout ability. It's just Eddie Hearn heard that and was just like, it's Mike Perry has no chance. And when I heard him say that so confidently, man, I was just like, all right, that's a done deal to wrap. I think Jake Paul's going to win all day this Saturday, especially hearing Eddie Hearn, a true expert, consummate professional in the sport of boxing. It's a done deal. But man, this buildup is going to be a blast, and don't miss the presser because it's going to be hilarious. Their back and forths are so good. They're just such a good smack talking duo, if you will, going back and forth. So anyways, I'm rooting for Perry to win. He's been doing well in bare knuckle. Yeah. I mean, look, I'm rooting for him too. I just don't think it's going to happen. It'd be amazing. Western Mass Climber says Mike ain't winning. And he also says 200 is heavy. Remember, Mike, it's very heavy. It's very heavy. So this is, it's very much in Jake's favor, but it's his fight and he can set it up how he wants and throwing no shade. You think I would go in, even if I had a weight advantage, to fight Mike Perry like this? It's insane. So we have to take a minute to stop attacking Jake Paul, in my opinion, and recognize the insane mountain that he's climbed here. I mean, it's just absolutely unbelievable. Hold on 1 second, guys. Oh, Louisa, I think can you grab the door? Okay, moving on to topic number 5. We've got Anthony Smith gets lit up by TJ Dillashaw and MMA Guru. Okay, so this was an interesting story that I wanted to share with you guys. MMA Everything okay? Okay. So this is an interesting story that kind of popped up because MMA Guru was just going off on Anthony Smith, and so was TJ Dillashaw. So we're going to talk about this. I want to play some of these clips from the MMA Guru here and get you guys' thoughts on this. But basically, man, he's just gone hardcore on him. So check this out.
Let's listen to what TJ says first of all.
TJ, the most asked question on our Jackson podcast: do we think Anthony Smith has what it takes to be a light heavyweight world champion?
Never.
No. Whoa. TJ.
That's, you know what? Yeah, TJ is a real one. Even though he cheated, this is the problem with MMA fighters in general. Everyone else in the room just went, whoa. You don't think you don't think he beats Pereira right now? You don't think he's world championship level? No, he obviously isn't. But they will never say it how it is. So you get these guys feeding into Smith's delusion, like, on your night, you could still be a world champion. And then you get Smith sticking around years too long. And then he has a really, really horrible ending to his career, full of CTE.
TJ, the most asked question on our Jackson podcast: do we think Anthony Smith has what it takes to be a light heavyweight world champion?
Never.
No. Whoa. TJ,
come on.
You're a two-time world champion. You did it in the UFC. Let other people have a little shine. You don't got to kill his dreams like that.
Dude, he's not good enough.
To say,
like he's not good enough. And that's really it. He's not good enough. If you're getting outstruck by Roman Dolidze, you're not good enough at striking to be an elite level world-class UFC fighter.
All right, so let's come back to the chat and love to get you guys comments as well. If you see what you guys think. So he just lost to Roman Dolidze. Roman Dolidze was coming up in fighting a weight class above his normal weight class. He usually fights at middleweight, I believe, and they fought at light heavyweight. And Anthony Smith did look pretty rough in the fight. Now, it was a short notice fight, but it was a shorter notice fight for Roman Dolidze. If you remember, they were kind of playing musical chairs to get that fight together. But Anthony Smith came in and had a pretty rocky and rough performance. Pretty much got dominated by Roman Dolidze, and then came out talking about it later in the week, saying that Roman Dolidze was really tough on the ground, was a tricky striker, different things like that. Basically saying that it was a tough fight. He was on short notice. I think his condition wasn't great. He really seemed out of breath. I think by the second round, it was pretty tough. And look, MMA Guru, TJ Dillashaw, I think they're giving it to us raw and real, the way just what they truly think. Now, the person that I wanted to bounce this off of was obviously Justin, because he's a fighter. He's a professional fighter. He can give his take. He's always got really interesting perspective. And I know he gives a lot of backlash to people that are not fighters, kind of critiquing fighters in this way. But TJ Dillashaw has been there, done that, right? He is a fighter. And he's a championship fighter, regardless of what you want to say about his PED use. I'm sure lots of other fighters, by the way, have abused. I mean, I'm not giving him a pass per se, but other fighters have certainly abused PEDs to some extent and never been caught. So I don't think we can take too much away from TJ Dillashaw. Plus, look at his performance where he dislocated his elbow against when he had the last championship fight against Aljo, and he just kept fighting through and going for it. I mean, he's a beast. Think about when he beat Corey Sandhagen. That was amazing. TJ Dillashaw is a real one, and he's giving his opinion on somebody's career like this. I think that I'm really curious to see Anthony Smith's reaction if he gives one this week, because I don't think these guys are trying to be hateful or disrespectful. I think they're just saying what they truly feel. Maybe they're right. I don't know. I don't know how this works when you get later in your career and you seem to be continuing to take damage without a proper end in sight. The last thing I'll say on this is, even on the Believe You Me podcast, Michael Bisping was kind of give it to him straight and being a little bit hard on him. In my opinion, he was basically telling Anthony Smith he shouldn't be fighting anymore. That's the way I read it. That's saying, look, man, it just sounds like you don't have the hunger in you, and that's the problem. And you can't just. And then Anthony Smith's like, well, maybe I just take some fun fights. And Michael Bisping was like, there's no such thing as fun fights. That's not a thing. Every fight, you're taking damage. You're in danger. You can potentially injure yourself, etc. So he kind of smashed that idea pretty quickly, which I thought was good. He was being a friend and tell him how it is. I don't know where I stand on it, but I just want to talk about it because I think a lot of people were chatting about it as well. And whatever Anthony Smith decides, I like seeing him fight. I'm excited to see him fight if it's the right decision for him. I'll definitely be tuning in if he chooses to continue. And maybe he needs a recalibration, new camp, new coach. I don't know. Whatever it is, or maybe none of that. But whatever he chooses, I hope it's the best for him, and I wish him the best of luck. All right. Going on to the final topic here. Nate Diaz is suing FanMio. I want to see if I can find some of the complaint. Give me 1 second. So I found out about this morning, and this is pretty interesting. And I want to talk about this from a few different vantage points. So for those of you guys who don't know, I'm also an attorney, and I want to tell you guys my thoughts from that standpoint. Okay, so he sues FanMio over $9 million. Okay, so here, check this out. Very interesting. Nate Diaz says he was promised $10 million. And by the way, remember when it came out that he made $500,000 or something for the entire fight? And Justin said that, and I corrected him. Well, now we know how much he was really paid. He was or supposed to be paid $10 million, not $500,000. So it says he was promised $10 million for his fight with Jorge Masvidal. Claims he never got 90% or $9 million. So the attorney says that they filed lawsuits in Miami, and they claimed that before he ever stepped in the ring, he made a deal with the promoter Solomon Angle of FanMio that he would get a $9 million payday after the fight. So apparently they had some skepticism about whether or not FanMio had the money to pay him in reserves, meaning FanMio apparently claimed that they had set aside the $10 million to pay him, and that it was independent of how well or how poorly the fight actually went. But then he says after he beat him, Angle refused to pay up. He couldn't supply the funds because he didn't profit off the fight like he expected. All right. The first thing I want to point out is I want to talk about all the crap that the UFC gets about fighter pay and this and that. And we're going to eventually do a deep dive. I really want to look into fighter pay very, very carefully at some point and try and do a mathematical analysis to really get to the bottom of what's going on, because I think that that's overblown. I think that fighter pay is not as low as people like to say. And the reason why I say that is because I also am a business owner, and I just understand if you're really underpaying people, eventually it's not going to work. These are all costs that are calculated strategically to maintain your fighters, to maintain the quality of the product, it's not just like, hey, I'm going to try and rip everybody off. That's usually not how businesses run and operate. You have to pay according to what makes sense. And I think that the UFC in a lot of cases has done that, probably. Otherwise, they wouldn't be in the position they're at now. This is just my outside vantage point. Again, we'll do a deep dive one day. But what I can say is there's never been a case where a fighter was promised something and the UFC didn't deliver. They agree in advance. Both parties come to the table. They sign a deal and they get paid, right? They might say after the fact, maybe we should have gotten more. Well, you had the chance to negotiate. You chose not to. You chose to accept the fight. And that's that. So for whatever people want to say about the UFC, they don't renege on their deals and what they've offered. They stay true to their word, whatever you want to say about that. So just food for thought. Okay, moving on. The lawsuit also claims that Angle told Diaz he couldn't pay him despite verbal and written agreements. I mean, this is insane. And he's saying his wife might divorce him. Come on. Be a man of your word. This is irrelevant. If this is true, which I assume it's true, this is just ridiculous. This is childish. It's crazy. So what? You're just banking. You're lying to them the entire time, saying you have the money, banking on the fact that this event is going to blow up, and then it doesn't go the way you want, and then you just don't pay them because you don't have the funds, or you're claiming it's going to bankrupt you or whatever. Like this is just ridiculous. You know what this reminds me of is that entire Theranos scam. Okay, maybe not to the same degree, obviously, not the same amount of money that was scammed from people, but it's this whole stupid idea of fake it till you make it, which I can't stand. And a lot of people will be proponents. Hey, you got to walk the walk, and then eventually, or talk the talk, and eventually you'll walk the walk, and people will buy into what you're doing. And it's just dishonest. I don't know what else to say. You're banking on this, and you're misleading people throughout this entire process, and now you're not paying him. You're only giving him $1 million. And Nate Diaz is one of the biggest combat sports athletes in the world. And this is what you do to him. It's absolutely, completely irresponsible and outrageous. And I hope he gets paid, but I don't even know now if he will. Who knows how much money they have in the reserves? By the way, now he's got to pay his lawyers. You think this is going to be a cheap litigation? I mean, it depends. They could settle maybe, but it just sucks. So, like, come on, dude. You're putting on this huge event. You sell out the Honda Center. Fine, it didn't work out as you wanted to, but sometimes you have to be willing to take a loss. If you're taking on the risk, you're taking on the potential upside, you're taking on the risk that this could lose money. The UFC probably loses money all the time on events. They just don't talk about it. So it's pretty disappointing. The fight against Masvidal was the second professional boxing tilt. He previously lost to Jake Paul. But okay, so that's basically the gist of the story. I want to see if there's anything else up here. MMA fighting. Let's see, MMA Junkie. Here we go. Fraud, breach of contract. I mean, God, this is just so open and shut. I don't even know why this guy would do this, right? Like, it's in the contract. What are you doing? So you're just not going to pay because you don't want to? It's ridiculous. Promoted the match, won by majority decision. Here, let's see the copy of the lawsuit. We'll read a little bit of it, and I'll explain to you what I can. Let's just check the intro. We don't want to get too deep. The case involves outright fraud. Man. Solomon Angle, famed mixed martial art boxer. Famio describes himself as an entertainment company, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so that's just defining the parties. Promise and contractually guaranteed in writing that they would pay a sum of $10 million with $1 million paid up front. So I assume the $1 million up front and then that was paid, and then, or maybe none of it was paid. No, I think just this $9 million wasn't paid. Diaz participated in an unprecedented amount of media promotion. Yeah, I heard Ariel talk about this, that basically, look, is that really equivalent to $20 million? Probably not. But this is what you have to do in a complaint, is you have to go for the upper end of all the potential damages. And then the judge might limit the damages, the jury might, or whatever. But you want to go for the full value. Maybe there's like some argument that you could put forth that this is a $20 million worth of marketing, but like it's probably an exaggeration. The boxing event between Diaz and Masvidal took place here. Okay, blah, blah, blah. They sold it out, which we already know. So now they are reneging on their oral and written promises of the $9 million. So that's what they're not paying. And yeah, here we go. They're putting the health and the safety on the line. And then the promoter has the chance to make, again, the chance. It's not a guarantee. But yo, that's how it works. If you want to put on the event and you want to pay people and you want to do this and that, and you want that potential upside, you got to roll with the punches and you got to take on that potential downside. I mean, you shouldn't have done it. You shouldn't have taken this risk on if you weren't prepared to accept it. It just really pisses me off. And I don't know all the ins and outs, so maybe there's more to it. But a ton of other people would have probably taken on this responsibility and maybe done a better job promoting and maybe made it profitable. So to cry at this point is just ridiculous. Okay, that's the gist of it. So yeah, I mean, I'm pretty upset about this. And I think that's fair to be upset. And I think you should be upset as well. All right, put in the comments below or the chat what you think about this as well. Let's just talk about some comments before we wrap up for the show today. I agree with Bisping. He should just keep getting the desk job. And those guys in LHW are no joke. Like, yeah, I mean, light heavyweight division is a bunch of killers. Yeah, I think I'm with you. And I think if Bisping is saying it, it's probably the right choice because Bisping only wants what's best. YouTube censorship is insane. What is that in reference to? I'm curious. Let me know what you're talking about. Western Mass Climber. It says Jake will get the win over Perry in boxing. I hope Jake gives Perry the rematch in BKFC. He might. I mean, Jake said he might do it. I don't know if it's true, but wow, that would be huge. If and when Jake Paul cross over into another sport, either bare knuckle or MMA, it's going to be massive. And you're going to have to give Jake all his props. For people who are trying to discredit him continuously, it's ridiculous. And we're going to make a full video on his entire story later this week. Okay. I'm promising it now. It's going to come out this week. And I'm going to change everybody's mind who's a Jake hater. But anyways, yeah, that will be a big event if and when he does that, which I do think he's going to do at some point because he wants to do it. He's the man. Got to respect him. All right, guys. That's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed the show with just me. Again, Justin will be back on Friday, and we'll have some more great content for you guys throughout the week as well. But as always, thank you guys for subscribing and following along this journey. Anakin and Kartik, I know you guys are newer to the show. Thank you for following along and being a part of the community. We enjoy it. We're building a cool community, I think, right here with some awesome MMA fans. If you want to join along on the ride, make sure to click subscribe. If you did like this video in particular, the stream, make sure to click that like button. I really appreciate it. And if you have comments in particular on what types of things you'd like to hear me or Justin talk about related to the sport, let me hear it. Love to do it. We'll make more videos, especially throughout the end of the summer. So that'll be a lot of fun. All right, guys. Thank you guys so much for joining, and we will see you in the next episode. Take it easy.